Hello everyone, this is Chaff Commander Coffee, back with my next episode in my 0 AD Empires Ascendant tutorial and overview series. Today we will be taking a look at a very unique culture, the Iberians. So, let's jump into the single player. I already have the Iberians selected, so yeah, I'm already prepped for this. Let's go. So, the thing you'll notice immediately with the Iberians that's a bit different is a large wall. Yep. So, we may as well, I'll have to build a few buildings just so that we can advance to the next age and so on and so forth. But I may as well go into some of the Iberians' civilization bonuses. So the very first one, which should be pretty obvious based on the huge wall, is the huge wall. The Iberians start on most maps. Now I have seen some maps where the Iberians do not spawn with a prefabricated wall. However, this is their first civilization bonus, is that they start with a prefabricated ring of walls around their base. One of the other advantages of these walls is that, if I just get some of my ranged units, so we get these skirmishers, I should be able to, so I can garrison some of these javeliniers on this wall. As you can see here, now he's on that wall. And now I have to remember how to get, and I have to then garrison them off the walls, like so. You also have these, you have standard gates, so you have a standard gate, you should start with 3 or 4, in this case we have 4. One for the east side here, one for the northeast, one for the north and west, and then one for the southwest. It really does depend on the map. As I said, in certain maps you will not start with a wall, which is kind of unfortunate, but that's just how it is. And it has multiple different kinds of advantages, but disadvantages as well. Do not let this wall fool you. It is very helpful, but at the same time it can be your death sentence if you don't use it correctly. So what I will do is, I will quickly just get those buildings on the go so that we can age up and go over the other civilization bonuses. The second one is, so this one is not yet implemented. It's the same, not the same, but it's one of the bonuses that I spoke about in my Carthaginian overview. Effectively, horses can be captured in the wild and placed in the corral. They do not generate food as per normal corralled animals. Instead, as long as they remain in the corral, the resource cost of training horse-mounted units is reduced by 5% per animal corralled. This is not yet implemented, however, which is a bit of a shame. As I said with the Carthaginians, they have a very similar ability. But I'm sure when it is implemented, you'll see the Iberians certainly pick up in different playstyles. But for now, they do not have access to that, which again is a shame, but never mind. The team bonus of the Iberians is infantry and cavalry citizen soldier skirmishers cost 50% less. This does not apply to champion units armed with javelins. So, all of your teammates, as long as you have a Iberian player on your team, will have their javelin-based cavalry and infantry reduced in cost by 50%, which is very significant. It is also a bit of a tell for your opponents if they know you've picked Iberians and they know that your team's javelineers will be cheaper. So do keep that in mind. It's not inherently just a bonus. It is also information for your enemies. But it's pretty good. And let's not lie, that is a pretty good ability. And we'll have them build a tower over there. Right. Another thing to note with the Iberians, which I don't think is actually on the Wikia straight away. It might be. Let me just check. No, okay. Right. is that the Iberian towers, their defense towers, and their, I believe it's their sentry towers as well. Let me just check. It might just be their standard defense towers. I believe their defense towers are more powerful than average towers. I will quickly just put the speed up so we get all of this construction done a bit quicker, because we do need to age up. But I believe the defense towers of the Iberians can hold 8 units instead of 5. Yeah, as you can see there when I'm hovering over the doorway, the defense tower. Yeah, you can garrison a total of 8 units instead of 5. It also gives a population bonus. So there you are. Yeah, there's some of the buildings, such as the farmstead and the storehouse, do not give population like the Celts, as we discussed in our previous few videos. But their defense towers do give a population bonus, as well as being able to garrison more units inside of them, which is pretty nice. I'm not going to lie, it's a pretty funky ability right there. I'll get some of those guys to mine some metal. We'll finish that marketplace, and then we will be able to age up. Right, so the unique technologies of the Iberians is you can unlock a flaming component to your javelin armed units, which causes target struck to become inflamed and lose hit points at a constant rate until either healed or repaired as appropriate. Now, I'm not quite sure if this is currently implemented, because I haven't ever seen anyone use this. I could be wrong, but I do know for a fact that one of the champion units for the Iberians is supposed to use flaming javelins, so we'll see when we get there. But I'm not 100% sure on that, so we'll leave that open in the air for the time being. Let's build a house just on the safe side. Right. And the second technology, or unique technology for the Iberians, is the metal costs for units and technologies is reduced by 50%. This is probably one of the strongest abilities for the Iberians, simply because metal is one of the resources you are going to find yourself needing a lot of for the late game technologies, as well as the Iberians, especially, who have a champion swordsman unit. So you will be using a lot of metal to get your all-important infrastructure up and going. I will build one of these, actually. Need to make sure I get all of my special buildings for the Iberians complete. Oh, don't tell me we don't have space for it. Oh, I'll have to build it outside. Build that, then build that. Thank you very much. Okay, so those are the unique technologies and the civilization bonuses for the Iberians. Now, as I said, some of them aren't quite implemented yet, which is a bit of a shame, but there's not much we can do about that. So, we will go over their units. I will, once the fort is complete, I may go over some of the technologies the Iberians have available to them, because that is quite important as well. But for now, we'll focus on units. So the first 2 units, which you can train at your barracks, and this is phase 1, is your citizen soldier, swordsman. So you get citizen swordsman. They do cost a small amount of metal instead of the standard 50 food, 50 wood for the spearmen. And the skirmishers, which are your citizen soldier javeliniers, as well as javelin armed cavalry skirmishers, citizen cavalry skirmishers. At your barracks, once you hit phase 2, you also gain access to spearmen, which are your basic citizen spearmen. Slingers, which are your basic citizen sling armed units, and your cavalry spearmen, which are your basic citizen soldier lancers. So this is the first sort of citizen lancer cavalry that we've seen that isn't a mercenary. So you can see their costs there in food and wood. Not too expensive. In fact, they're a little bit food cheaper than the cavalry skirmishers. An interesting thing to note, the Iberians do not have a longer ranged unit or spearmen available in phase 1. So I will say right now, it's a good job you get the walls, because if you didn't have the walls, you would be in for some trouble against certain nations. particularly the Macedonians and the Romans. But I'll come back to that later when we discuss some of the strategies surrounding the Iberians. So we have our fortress here. I don't see any of the unique technologies, and I can't get them from there. Again, if I can't find them, they probably are available from somewhere, or they're not quite implemented yet. It's hard to tell. It may be that they're available from the Wonder. I'm not 100% sure, so there you go. But we'll find out sooner or later. Let's just quickly build some of our champion units, just have them lying around. Just grab a swordsman, grab a skirmisher, put these units back in there, get that cav over there, get another cav, another slinger, and spin. Right, so let's just get our bulk of units together so we can take a look-see at all of them. So from the fortress we have access to the only siege weapon available to the Iberians, which is the battering ram. Again, I have no issues with this because I love the battering ram, and it works particularly well with the Iberians as well, because they have particularly good swordsmen. And assault units like that, very close range melee orientated units, generally benefit from the garrison ability of the battering ram a bit more. So, let's put the speed down. We've got our basic spin there, basic slinger, our cavalry lancer, which I'll quickly hover over the stats for the cavalry lancer, but they are exactly half of what the standard or the champion lancers have available to them. And we did also take a look at a citizen lancer when we looked at Carthage, because they have a mercenary italic lancer available to them. But there you go, that's our first sort of recruitable citizen lancer cavalry that we can take a look at. We have our skirmisher here and our swordsman. Right, and then we have our two champions. We've got the champion cavalry skirmisher. Now these are very interesting. I will have to go into them in more detail, as well as our champion swordsman. The champion swordsmen are pretty much the same as the Gallic swordsman, which we just took a look at in the last episode. So nothing special in terms of their stats there. However, now is a good time to point out the Iberians have a special upgrade. This is a unique upgrade to the Iberians. There is also a similar one available to the Malians. But for the Iberians, in our blacksmith, we have Toledo Steel, which is a steelworking upgrade. And it increases the hack attack for all sword units. That's your champion swordsman, your citizen swordsman, and your champion cavalry swordsman. Not champion cavalry swordsman, what am I talking about? Yeah, your citizen swordsman, your infantry champion swordsman, and your... Sorry, I'm thinking about another team entirely, but do ignore that. Yeah, your champion swordsman and your citizen swordsman gain a 20% increase to their hack attack, which goes on top of all of the upgrades you get for your infantry attack and their armor and such. So later on in the game, once all upgrades have been researched, the Iberians will have 20% more attack on their swordsmen than any other team in the game. So you can see why I said in my Gaul overview that you do not beat the Iberians or the Malians. The Malians get a Woot Steel upgrade, which is effectively the same thing. But those two teams in particular, you cannot beat their swordsmen in the late game. They will always win. If it's man for man, you have equal numbers, their swordsmen will always beat you. Whether it's their citizen swordsman or their champion swordsman. They will win. So you have to be really careful playing against these two particular nations in the late game. So the real interesting unit for the Iberians, I mean, not that their swordsmen aren't interesting, they're just really good. But the real interesting unit is the champion cavalry skirmisher. Their special thing is they have flaming javelins. Now, even though it shows up in the wiki as being a unique technology, these cavalry do in fact have flaming javelins. You may not be able to, if I were to attack a building, for example, I don't think you'd actually see the javelins on fire. I can't remember if they put a particle effect on the javelins just yet. But this makes them particularly good against buildings. Which is a bit odd, you might think to yourself. The stats of the champion cavalry skirmisher are 5 pierce damage and 15 crush damage at a rate of 1.25 attacks per second, or 1.25 attacks made every... I keep saying that wrong. You shouldn't get the wrong impression. A lower number is better. Derp. Every 1.25 seconds, they complete one attack, as opposed to the swordsman, which completes an attack every 0.75 seconds. Sorry, I keep saying that in the wrong order. I put my words in the wrong order, and it might throw people off. So do excuse me if you were confused in previous videos. Anyway, and they have a range of 32. They have a hack armor of 7 and a pierce armor of 5. So they're pretty bulky units, on top of the fact that they're ranged javeliniers. However, their damage is pretty awful. If we look at the reason I haven't been talking about crush armor on human units is because they have, well, they do have incredibly high crush armor. Pretty much every human unit has at least 65% or better in crush armor damage reduction. And no human unit, aside from the slingers, even does crush damage, and they only do a very small amount. I'll come back to that. Yeah, so other than a very small amount of crush damage on the slingers, no real unit does do crush damage, aside from siege weapons, so it never really affects human units. But in the case of the Iberian cavalry skirmishers, they do have quite a lot of crush damage. As it says in their tooltip down here, they are good versus buildings. The real advantage of having these units is that, unlike other cavalry that you will use to raid your opponent's base, specifically to kill their units to damage their economy, these cavalry are the opposite. You raid your opponent's base to destroy their buildings to damage their economy, which is a little odd. Since there's no other unit that has that kind of effect in the game, but it does make them particularly powerful. If you let the Iberians get late game and start building up their number of these flaming javelin cavalry, they will ruin your economy when you least suspect it, which is pretty nasty. They don't even need to kill your people; they literally just destroy all your buildings, and you can't. It's very difficult to catch them as well. Without using your own sort of champion cavalry units or just standard cavalry units. So they can be really hard to deal with. But since they don't actually hit your population quite so hard, the effects of their raiding may not be felt until a bit later on. But they are just as deadly, do not underestimate them. The other unit I probably should quickly talk about is the Iberian Slinger. The reason why is they have slightly higher damage ratings than ordinary slingers. They are slightly better than ordinary slingers. When you read the wiki pages that I post alongside the videos, do read them in a bit more depth, because some of the bonuses of the teams aren't inherently listed. They're sort of... Not that the wiki is badly laid out or anything, but these overviews aren't meant to be completely exhaustive. But it does say in the Iberian one, in one of their sort of more descriptive comments about their playstyles, is that they have some of the strongest slingers in the game. This translates to them having slightly higher attack than average slingers. So for any of the other teams that you're interested in playing, I do highly recommend, if you do select a team you want to main or you want to play a lot of, do read the wiki page on them in its full detail, because you might notice something that I haven't covered completely. Okay, moving on to the heroes. We have Karos, he is a infantry swordsman, and his ability is, oh well, he has two abilities. His first one is Valiant Defender. 75% more arrows are shot per soldier for the building or siege tower he is garrisoned in. So if you have Karos garrisoned in a fortress, which can hold a total of 20 men, he will allow you to fire out 75% more arrows, which is an incredible amount. When you consider, if you've got all 20 men garrisoned in that fortress, you will just be hailing arrows down upon your opponent. From a very easy to defend location. The fortresses of the Iberians are particularly tough, and so are their towers. So Karos is very good for a defensively minded player. When you have him out in the battlefield though, he provides a +1 armor for all soldiers within 50 meters of him. So he's not completely stuck with just sitting inside buildings all the time. You can use him out on the field, though his bonus is not particularly strong. It's not that it's a weak bonus by any stretch of the imagination. +1 armor to your units is still very noticeable. It's in fact an entire upgrade to their armor from either of these blacksmith upgrades. But it isn't quite as powerful as some of the other heroes have as far as field combat bonuses go. But he's a very defensively orientated hero. We then have Indibil, who is a cavalry spearman, and his ability is -20% training time and -15% resource cost for all of your soldiers. Now, Indibil is probably, I mean, in my opinion, training time and resource cost are two of the strongest things in the game, and the fact that he gets both of them makes him pretty insane. Your units aren't stronger, don't get me wrong, your units are not stronger, but if you're expanding towards your opponent and building more and more barracks and more fortresses, Indibil is just crazy. Like, really, he is insane. 20% training time, that's a fifth. Every 5 units you train, you effectively train an extra unit for the time that you save. Now, if we also consider that bulk training units is more efficient than training them, so if I was to train 1 swordsman, it takes 10 seconds. If I were to train 5 swordsmen, it takes 37 seconds. If we had Indibil as well, he cuts another 20% off the training time. Oh, dearie me. Sorry, my sticky keys came up with a pop-up. Please ignore that. I may be able to edit that out of the video, but if not, please ignore it. But yeah, so if I was to bulk train, say, the swordsman, with Indibil, we get a further 20% reduction in their training time, which I think would cut another 7 seconds off them. Yeah, it should do. So they would only take 30 seconds to train 5 units, as opposed to 10 seconds to train 1. It's just incredible, absolutely incredible. And then, on top of that, he makes your units cheaper, so you can get more of them. So you get more units on top of your more units. It's just, honestly, if the developers are listening or watching, you might want to tone Indibil down a little bit, because I don't think the Iberians are one of the strongest teams in the game. Like, this is my personal opinion coming out here. I do not believe the Iberians are one of the strongest teams in the game. Do not get me wrong. However, I do believe Indibil is one of the strongest heroes in the game by quite some margin. He is just bonkers. The training time and the resource, he could have either of those abilities and still be incredibly good. And when you put them both on him, it makes him really, really powerful. Like, okay, let's stop talking about Indibil, because I could literally talk about him all day. He's just amazing. The third hero we have is Viriato. His first ability is 20% movement speed for all soldiers within 60 meters of him. And his second ability is a 100% resource loot increase for every enemy unit killed or structure destroyed within 60 meters. Now, just to, one of the things we did talk about with the Gauls was looting. They get more ore and food when they loot and destroy buildings. When you hover over a unit's stats, you will see it has, under its armor, it has gathering rate, then speed, and then loot. Loot is, and the chevrons you see there is experience. So if you were to kill an Iberian citizen swordsman, you would earn 5 food and 5 metal, as well as 100 experience for the unit that killed your swordsman there. If we were to think about that in terms of Viriato, he doubles the amount of loot that you receive for killing enemy units or destroying their buildings. And because he increased the movement speed for your soldiers, Viriato is a very raiding heavy, very offensive, flanking type of hero. The odd thing about him, although it may have been a balanced decision, is that Viriato is a infantry swordsman. Now really you would want to use Viriato with a squad of these flaming javelin cavalry, because they destroy buildings incredibly quickly. And also, being champions, they're not bad at fighting other units, even though their damage is mostly crush. They don't do near as much damage as other javelineers. In fact, their damage is probably going to be less than even a citizen javelineer, because the majority of their damage is crush. But they do have a lot of hit points, so they're by no means like useless against other infantry. But really, you would want Viriato to be raiding with your javelin champion cavalry, because you could destroy buildings and receive twice the loot from them. So if we take a look at, say, a house, you receive 10 wood when you loot a house. Instead, you get 20. A storehouse, you get 100. This is a farmstead. You would earn 100 food and 10 wood. Instead, with Viriato, you get 200 food and 20 wood. With a more advanced building like a temple, you would earn 20 wood, 100 stone, and 100 metal if Viriato helped you destroy it. So, if you are with Viriato, you generally want to focus on destroying your opponent's key buildings. The buildings that are best to destroy in terms of loot are generally the storehouses. This storehouse in particular is only 20 wood, so scratch that. Farmsteads, though, provide quite a lot of food when you destroy them. Marketplaces provide quite a bit of everything when you destroy them. Barracks, not particularly high value. Blacksmiths are not bad, it will cripple your opponent's economy as well. Corrals, not quite as good as farmsteads, although generally your opponent, if they do build corrals, will build quite a lot of them. Temples, though, temples are a good thing to aim for, and people do generally build more than one. So if you are going to use Viriato to raid your opponent's base, specifically for resources, you should aim for farmsteads and temples to really maximize that loot value. But other than that, 100% extra resources from killing units. He's kind of like Brennus, but he provides all resources as opposed to just metal. So there you have it. Again, Viriato, very raiding-orientated character. It's just that because he's a foot infantry, as opposed to a cavalry, it does limit his mobility, which is a bit odd. Like I said, it may be a balancing, because the Iberians might have benefited from him being cavalry a bit too much with their champion javelineers. But considering how strong Indibil is, like, just how strong Indibil is, I mean, why not make him a cavalry? Or make Indibil a bit more balanced? I mean, again, personal opinion. But those are your 3 heroes for the Iberians. So that's the roster, your heroes, and let's take a look at some of the buildings. Now, we already discussed that your towers provide population capacity, like your houses, and also can garrison more units inside of them, making their towers particularly strong. The fortresses are also, I think their health and their loyalty is a bit stronger than other fortresses. Could be wrong there, I can't remember the stats of a fortress off the top of my head. But your towers are certainly a lot more powerful with the Iberians. One of the other sort of main building that you have, which is different, is your, where is it? Ah, here it is. The revered monument. Now you can see this little bull shrine here. Right, I will probably have to look at, as you can see, when I select it, you can see it has an AoE. So it has an AoE similar to the temple. I think it's slightly longer range. But over our units, you can see a double cross sword icon. What the revered monument does is 20% attack damage for all soldiers within 50 meters. So, all units within vision of this monument will fight harder, hence the 20% attack damage for your soldiers. The other bonus is buildings in the territory of the monument do not decay, which is pretty interesting. I have seen this used in particular with expansions. So if you build an expansion, so you build another town centre here. If you build this off, well, I can't build it unless I scout the area, but let's say we scout just a little bit over here. Oh, the AI is expanded. Good job, Sandbox AI. If I was to build a town centre all the way over here, and the town centre, and we got our radius of our town centre around, say, this location. If the town centre was captured or destroyed, see, here you go, the enemy is expanding. Good stuff. Oh, there is a particle effect. That's pretty nice. Anyway, if we were to expand, please ignore the battle raging onwards. If we were to expand here, and we took all of this land, and then our opponent destroyed the town centre, because generally you want to destroy or capture the town centre in an expansion, because that will basically remove the borders surrounding those buildings. And once those buildings are not covered by a border, their loyalty, as we can see the blue bar here, will decrease until it reverts to neutral, or your opponent will have an easier time of capturing it. Now, if you build these monuments, the Iberian revered monuments, surrounding your buildings in your expansion, not only will your units be stronger whilst defending that expansion, but those buildings will not decay. So even if your opponent does rush your town centre down in your expansion and knocks it to the ground, your buildings will remain under your control, which is particularly useful for things like towers and storehouses, so your people can continue to work and defend your lands without the buildings swapping over to Gaia. So that is the sort of main special building for the Iberians. What this means is that the Iberians tend to play a very defensive expansionist game. They will use this main sort of ringed city that they start with and build up their economy from here, build up their population until they feel safe, whilst they raid you with their cavalry. And whilst you're busy dealing with their cavalry raids coming in from different sides, they will expand to another part of the map. They will then fortify it using their particularly powerful towers and their monuments. Once they have fortified that location and stripped it of all of the important resources, they will move on to the next one. And the Iberians will systematically conquer the entire map if you let them. And they will attempt to raid you with their cavalry whilst they're doing that. So that's just the overall arcing strategy that I have seen with the Iberians perhaps the most regularly. So, we've spoken about the unique buildings and the roster for the Iberians, so let's talk about it in a bit more detail. Now, I do want to start this sort of discussion by saying the Iberian wall that they start with is by no means an advantage. It is an advantage, but it's not a, oh, we get a free wall, that is great, okay? You have limited space within this wall to build. Also, if you get stuck inside of this wall in the early game, all you have is your metal and your stone. Your metal and your stone, your 5,000 metal and stone that you always start every game with in a node nearby your town centre. that will always spawn inside of your walls. But wood won't. You have these few sparse trees, and that's it. All of your wood in any map will be outside of your walls. Which means if your opponent is particularly aggressive, especially with teams that have early citizen lancer cavalry like Macedon or Rome, you have no spearmen in phase 1. You have absolutely no spearmen. And you cannot build defense towers. The best thing you can build is the sentry towers. So you have swordsmen and skirmishers and skirmisher cavalry. Lancer cavalry will walk all over you. And since all of your wood is outside of your base, it's very easy to get the Iberians sort of in a position where they are stuck inside of their walls and cannot gather any wood. And with no wood, you really can't do anything. I mean, look, your units, all of your soldiers cost wood. All of them. So without wood, you can't do anything. So it's very easy to cripple an Iberian player if they rely on their walls too much. What this means for the Iberians is that your first thing you should be doing in any situation, when you designate, when you look at your map, when you spawn into the map, you want to identify your easiest to defend wood line. So in this case, we have the wood line to our south, directly south of our town centre here, and the wood line to our northeast. Now, if I had to pick one, I would pick the northeast one. And the reason why is because we have this mountain here. This mountain will act as a little bit of a buffer for our units. So if I were to start the game and be like, oh, we need wood, where do we put our storehouse? I would place a storehouse out here. That way we can gather wood relatively in safety because our enemy will be coming from the opposite end of the map. So they will spawn up here, we are down here. We should gather wood here to start with because it's safer. It may also be an idea to stick a defense tower down nice and early because I'm not going to lie, the fact you don't have spearmen can absolutely ruin you against early cavalry rushes. So really you need to be careful about that when playing the Iberians. It is a case of you are at an early game disadvantage. You really are because you don't have spearmen. Once you hit phase 2 though, you will gain access to your spearmen, your slingers, and your cavalry spearmen. So once you hit phase 2, you kind of mitigate the issues with your unit roster. Now with the fact that you gain citizen swordsmen and your Toledo steel working upgrade, you have a particularly strong roster of backbone infantry. The Iberians are very, very good at frontal engagements. They do not mind going man-to-man, toe-to-toe, and fighting you out in the field. They are very good at that. Given that they have Lancer cavalry and Javelin cavalry, they are quite happy to raid you and also have fairly solid mobility as well. And given their slingers are particularly powerful, they don't lack in the range department for units either. The only thing that they really have a lack of is actual range. Again, nations with archers will be able to outrange you, which can be a problem. As far as their champion units go, your champion swordsman is the only one you can rely on for killing power in the late game. The flaming javelin cavalry, those particular champion units, are really only suited for destroying buildings, for raiding and knocking your opponent's economy down. So you have to rely on the champion swordsman to do the bulk of your late game fighting. Which means where the Iberians really lack is they can be outranged by certain nations, and their cavalry can be destroyed. If your opponent has champion sword cavalry or champion spear cavalry, you will lose the cavalry game. Because your citizen cavalry will not be able to beat them, and your champion cavalry are not suited for fighting other units. So you will lose the cavalry game the longer the game goes on. And you will lose the range game. So what the Iberians, thankfully the Iberians have the perfect solution to this. And that is, their towers are awesome. they're stronger and they can fit more units inside of them. And their fortresses are pretty good too. So as I said, the Iberians play a very slow build expansionist game. With the Iberians, you want to hit phase 2 as soon as possible, and you want to think about where you can expand to and where you can protect using those towers. So if you think any of the teams, like Carthage's walls may be 3 times as strong, but if you really want to know a team that will turtle, it will be the Iberians. The Iberians are like the turtle team of 0 AD. They will build lots of bases, lots of walls, lots of towers, because honestly their roster supports that. If they may win open engagements once a melee has started, but before a melee has started, they can get ranged down and they can easily be outmaneuvered by champion cavalry. So you need to be careful whilst playing the Iberians. It is very much about the slow advance. Once you do force that engagement though, you will pretty much always win it, because your champion swordsmen are they are unmatched. They are unmatched. The only thing that might come close to them is the Spartiates, but we won't talk about them yet because we haven't got to Sparta, and as far as I'm aware, Sparta will be the last team that I do an overview of, so I hope you look forward to that. Right, so if we were to consider some of the heroes in terms of Iberian strategies, we do have Karos. Karos loves building fortresses further and further up the map, closer to your opponent, because you can build a fortress, stick Karos in it and a bunch of units, push your opponent back up the map, and then build another fortress, and then do it again and again and again until you are literally building fortresses on your opponent's doorstep. That is what Karos is good at. Karos is really good at playing the border game. You can secure your borders very easily with the Iberians because you have very powerful towers, and your walls are pretty good. You can garrison units on these walls. So Karos really is about playing the border push. You want to be expanding towards your opponent as much as possible with Karos. With Indibil, you can basically do whatever you want because he's really OP. Sorry, I'll try not let my own personal bias overshadow my opinion of Indibil. But honestly, if I had to pick of any hero in the Iberians, I would just take Indibil every time, because he makes all your units cheaper and faster to train, which is just bonkers. But a particular strategy you might utilise with Indibil is you want to be very heavy with your raiding with Indibil, and you want to actually be raiding or pushing with your standard citizen soldiers as well. You want to be throwing swordsmen and javelineers and slingers. You want to be chucking everyone you can at your opponent as much as you can, because you can train those units back a lot quicker. So the real way to play with Indibil is a pressure game. You always want to be applying pressure to your opponent. You want to try and force them off of resources. You want to try and knock down key buildings on those attacks, even if you don't trade very well man for man. It doesn't matter, because you can get those men back faster and cheaper, which means you can also get your economy up and running faster as well, because again, citizen soldiers form the backbone of both your army and your economy. So if you're pulling your men off to fight your opponent, Indibil will allow you to retrain those units back onto your farms, maybe not your farms, but your mines and your woodcutting. He will allow you to replenish those a lot faster. And with the reduced training time and resource cost, you can afford to use your units a bit more aggressively for the by and large of your playstyle. So Indibil really is a very pressure-heavy hero. You want to constantly be on the attack. You never want to let your opponent get near you. You just want to be pushing them away from their resources, even if you aren't pushing their borders back. Karos is very much about expanding your borders towards your opponent, building town centres, building fortresses. Indibil doesn't care about building fortresses and town centres. He is about pushing your opponent off resources. Literally attacking your opponent, getting units inside their borders as often as possible, and really denying their map control, because that's what he can do with his ability to get more units on the field. And our final hero is Viriato. His sort of strategy you might want to implement with Viriato is, again, you want a very raid-heavy strategy. Now, of all the heroes, I find Viriato to be in a bit of an odd place, because the Iberians are very defensive. Viriato is a very raiding-heavy character, but he's an infantry unit, and your raiding units are your cavalry. So because his abilities are based on radius, they have to be within 60 meters of him. He can't keep up with the cavalry, so your cavalry don't benefit from this. So the best way I can see playing Viriato is kind of like how you would play with Indibil. Except the big difference is you want to get Viriato with a group of, say, 40 or 50 men. You want the rest of your population cap on your economy, like purely focusing on economy, purely focusing on expanding across the map. What Viriato does is take a core group of units, probably your champion swordsmen, because they have a very high capture rate compared to citizen soldiers. Even though he doesn't benefit your looting from capturing buildings, generally speaking, buildings will have a lower hack armor than pierce armor. So if you have to sort of pick, you would want hack units to try and knock buildings down. Not that you want them to, but there you go. You may want to bring a couple of the cavalry skirmishers around with you with Viriato, but he will slow them down. But basically what you want to be doing is taking a group of probably champion units, using his movement speed buff to get them around the map faster and hit exposed points of your opponent's base. You want to identify with a few scouts where your opponent hasn't placed his defences. You want Viriato to go in and surgically strike those locations with a group of champions, knock some buildings down, plunder those important buildings such as farmsteads and temples, because they have very high resource gain. And then once he's hit those locations and killed any of the sort of units that are straggled around, because he gets resources from killing enemy units as well, he does increase that loot as well. You do want to kill units, but as soon as your opponent shows up with a condensed force, like an actual organized force, to come and get rid of your raid, you want to back out. Viriato uses that move speed to avoid engagements. You want to hit your opponent, and then as soon as your opponent responds with enough units that it becomes problematic, or it actually turns into an engagement, you want to just leave. You just back all your units away, get back to your base, heal up your units again, refresh your numbers if you took a few casualties, and then attack from another location. So Viriato really is about forcing your opponent to respond. And once your opponent has responded, that means his units are not elsewhere on the map. And because they are not contesting the other parts of the map, you can expand safely. So Viriato, I would say of all the heroes, he has a very advanced and complex strategy associated with him. It's hit and run tactics, but because the Iberians aren't playing for that sort of defensive expansion, you have to be micromanaging your raids with Viriato and his group of elite units, whilst also expanding around the map. So he's probably one of the harder heroes to play with, but I could see his playstyle paying off in the late game, because the looted resources are resources that you cannot gain. If you think about it in terms of, you can mine stone, you can mine metal, but once those nodes are depleted, they disappear. Like, we have no more metal here because it's all been mined. These trees that have been cut down, they won't come back. So the loot is effectively free resources. They are extra resources on the map that normally wouldn't exist. It's kind of like trade. Trade is the only way to generate infinite resources, but technically looting your opponent kind of helps with that as well. So do keep in mind Viriato will aid you in being able to generate those sort of extra resources. Right, I believe that is everything with the Iberians. I haven't missed anything, have I? I don't think so.
Yeah, Steve?
No. Okay, right. That was my overview of the Iberians. I hope my personal bias towards one of the heroes didn't skew any of your opinions about it, but I honestly believe if any of the devs are watching, you might want to take a look at Indibil and just maybe slightly, rebalance him just a little bit. Maybe either take his resource cost off, or take the training time off, or reduce them. Maybe both to 10%. That would probably be a bit more balanced. I don't know. I'm not a game developer, but as a player, like, that is my gut feeling with Indibil. So yeah, that's just a little note to any devs that watch this video, maybe, possibly. Just one player's opinion on that particular hero. So take that with a pinch of salt. I am not the player base. I do not obviously have the majority opinion of all the players, or maybe I do, but I don't know, because yeah, you have to see what the comments are like. But anyway, enough rambling on that. That is the Iberians. I hope you enjoyed the video. My next, if I can quickly check, I might be able to find out what my next video will be on in terms of heroes, in terms of teams. Yeah, as a sort of fix around to the quality, I changed some of my OBS settings, and I'm now having to look at the wiki on my phone. But that should, if you give me one moment. I believe the next team I will be doing a video on is the Macedonians. So we've got our second Greek team in the lineup to take a look at. But yeah, we'll see in the next episode. It's been me, Chaff Commander Coffee. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.